great. I'm glad that we could be here. My name is Gretchen, and I'm from the Jefferson County Library, and we're doing an E3 talk. This is part 2 of the garden talk that we had last week. I know that some of you didn't see it live because there were some technical difficulties. That's what we're going to say. So, but we're here tonight, and you're on. And if you have questions, let us know, and we'll try to get those over here to Karen and Carol, because Karen has brought Carol too. So we're doing an E3 talk today, and with Karen McCarthy. Hey, I got it right.
Good job.
And Carol Leone.
Yes, thank you.
Right, for the Madras Garden Depot. And so let's just go ahead and get started. And if you are out there in Facebook land, just let us know if you can hear it. I told them to speak up, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so go ahead. There we go.
Hi, everybody. Karen from Madras Garden Depot. There's this Facebook friend over there. Should I look there or look there? There. Hi. So I have invited a friend of mine, Carol Leone. I've known her almost as long as I've lived in Madras, and she's been helping us out for a few years. Whenever we have like a garden talk up at the nursery, we invite Carol and other gardening friends of mine. That we have like a gardeners roundtable because of COVID. We haven't been able to do that, so it's just the two of us. So I invited her tonight to kind of help out, answer questions, and kind of keep us on track. And tonight we are going to be talking about where are you going to put that stuff, meaning what are you going to do with your garden? Where are you going to put your seeds that you've started, the plants that you've been accumulating, things like that. And before we start out, I just really want to thank Swan and Gretchen for helping out and getting this all presented to you. And if you have any questions, I'm not quite sure if anyone can see them on the Facebook, but if you have questions afterwards, you can always email or message us at the library or at Madras Garden Depot, and we can get you some answers. So thanks. Does everybody have one of these outline handouts? We kind of created them.
Yes, I do.
Yay! Welcome.
Sorry we're late.
Anyway, so last time we were here, and you two gals were here, we talked about seed starting, when to do it, and all that. And really quickly, basically this is an outline. You can kind of see that. On the back page down here, I've provided some really helpful links for gardening in this area. And that's just wanted to point that out. If I start going on about something in detail, it's probably because it's related to one of these links, which you can access. So, and also, don't hesitate if you have any questions. We're here to answer questions during and after. So to get it rolling, the main thing is a garden site. If you have one already that you've developed and you're continuing to work on, or if you're considering a new gardening site, you really need to think about sun, number one. Another thing is like permanence, like is it at a rental? Is it something that you're not going to be able to maybe be there in a couple years? You might want to consider doing containers instead of in the ground. You know, that kind of thing. Access for water, getting water to where you're at. How easy is it? That kind of thing. You're going to need at least 6 hours of sun, of daylight. The sunnier, the better. And one thing about Central Oregon and our county in particular, we have a lot of daylight in this neck of the woods. We have a lot of sun, which is really, really good. That's why we have all that really high dollar farm ground here. And we do have good soil here. Some places it's not so great, but say up on the plains or in lots of other places, I know Carol's like going to debate me on that because she's had to deal with some really miserable sites, but she's done very well dealing with it, and maybe we can talk about that in a minute.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And so yeah, your site is really important. Do you get shade in the morning at that site, or do you get it in the afternoon? Does anybody know what's better, afternoon sun or morning sun?
Better?
I think afternoon.
Afternoon sun is generally much better. Yeah. For the kind of crops, if you only exclusively grow lettuce, it would be the opposite, because lettuce doesn't mind a little bit of shade, especially around here. So anyway, primarily, yeah, definitely want to have the maximum sun. So you got to think about the trees, the buildings that are nearby, that kind of a deal. Do you have anything to?
No, one of the things that I looked at first when I moved to the little property I have is what kind of trees were around there. And I've been dealing with that and complaining to Karen forever because of the Chinese elm monsters that are next door to me and shade my yard. So luckily the neighbors have trimmed those back for us. So that's been an issue for sure. And the fact that I live up near the high school, so on the hill there was no soil because of the house that was moved in there. So that's been a challenge, but it's also been a benefit in some ways because I've had to go to container gardening and raised beds in order to take care of that. So that's something that a lot of you deal with, and I know I've written little things on my blog about having to be really strong and determined to garden in Madras. So, and Karen argues about that with me because of some of the wonderful soil that's in other places in this area. It's amazing.
It's true. And I have kind of the in-between. We don't have a farm up on the plains. We have a farm up on the lower, like the northeast into Madras, like off of 97. It's in full sun. I created it in 2008. It had been where they had parked like farm equipment for years and years. So God knows what was in that soil. But it's like a really good garden now, but it's taken me that long. Probably the last 5 years have been really productive. Before then, it's just sort of like dialing it in. But it's pretty dialed in now. But it is in full sun, full wind. We don't have anything protecting it. So it's another point to bring up is that you're gonna need some idea of protection, like even the crops I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, using plants to help each other to provide shade and windbreak, like corn, like blocks of corn, or like setting up a row of tomatoes. If you want to have some berries in your garden, this is something that's really critical. Those are perennial plants, so wherever you put something that's not going to be an annual where you would change it out at the end of every season, you're going to put berries in there. You have to really think about that because they're there permanently, and they also like to travel, but they also create, they'll get high enough that they will create shade and they'll block the wind for more delicate things like, smaller tomatoes, littler spinach, and, little things like that. So, anyway, so where you're going to plant your garden, like where you're going to site it, is really important. So, talking about your garden site, now the next really critical thing is soil testing. What is actually in the soil? What have you added to the soil? What do you need to add to the soil? I own a gardening store, so people come in daily. They go, what do I need to put in my soil? And I go, I don't know. Do I look like, like one of those, people that can, read things, interpret things by just like touching it? I'm not like that. But, soil test, if you want to spend, like $100 in soil amendments and fertilizers and stuff, great. We'll be happy to sell it to you. I can't guarantee anything because I don't know what's there and I don't know what's going to happen. But getting a soil test, they're not cheap. They're definitely not cheap in our area because guess what? We've got a lot of commercial farming, all this agriculture. So they have a market for soil tests because farmers need soil tests. Some of the contracts that they have are based on soil tests. So they're going to jack the pricing up because it's really got a big bottom line. This is, I'll hand this around. This is from the University of Massachusetts Extension Service. They have a soil testing lab. It's back in Massachusetts. I know that sounds weird, but you know those boxes you can get for priority mail, like for $15 you can send it off across the country. You can actually share if you're a family and you have different gardens. You can just throw everything in one box and it's all labeled and all that. And you follow the directions. It's $20 a soil test. Plus, there's like if you want add-ons, like how much organic matter is in your soil. A lot of people don't know that. Most soil here, when you start gardening, there's almost zero organic matter. I mean, it's bad, but organic matter is important.
Horse manure is organic mode.
It is.
Yeah. Ours has got a lot.
Okay, but you could also have, guess what, an excess of nitrogen. So if you're fertilizing your garden and you have excess nitrogen in your soil based on the manures that are in there, you could actually be producing a lot of really nice leafy greens, but heck, when it comes to tomatoes or stuff that has to set fruit, maybe not so much,
We haven't used, it'll be our first year using it. It used
Gotcha.
to be an arena, a riding arena. Now
Right.
it's going to be a garden.
Gotcha. So, it may behoove you to, I couldn't resist, to, and I'm a person that has horses and I've used manure, but it might behoove you to get a soil test, just to know from the get-go what to aim for, what to shoot for. And I'll pass this around, but I can't recommend it, a soil test enough. And I actually did check with our state, with the OSU in the Valley, to see if they had a soil testing service. They don't. They will do it for their in-house, for all their ag research, but they won't do it for outside. I don't know if that's because of COVID. I don't know if that's just because they just don't want to do that. But most land grant universities across the country all had soil testing labs. We all have extension services, but we don't all have soil labs anymore. So this is really a cool thing. And just if you want to check, the state has a site at OSU. They have a list of soil testing labs, and you can go online and look at the websites, and you can see a lot of the soil tests start at $50 to $60 for one test. So this is a great deal. Takes about 10 days, and they'll either email you your results or they'll send it in a hard copy. You save $2 if they email it to you. And then if you have questions, you can always call the extension in Redmond. The master gardeners there, well, if you get a recommendation on your soil test that says you need to add, 5 pounds of potash type fertilizer per 100 square feet, and you're going, I don't know what that means, you can call and they can walk you through it. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, do you have anything to add about any of that hoo-ha?
Well, for a person who's doing raised beds and container gardening, that I haven't done the soil test. Karen gives me a hard time about that just every year, but it changes. And one of the things I'm dealing with now that I'm going to have to take care of is the fact that indeed the invasive roots of the Chinese elm have gotten into my raised beds. They've gone underneath, and there are clots of those things, just tangles. So I'm going to have someone, a laborer, come in and take all that soil out and replace it. So then I'm going to be starting from scratch. So I'm going to be...
We might be able to work out something to help Carol with that problem. So what she's got is fibrous roots. Does anybody know about, like tree roots? There's like main roots, and then there's lateral roots, and then there's all these fibrous roots. So it's the fibrous roots. I have the same thing in my garden, not in my vegetable garden, but in my garden. And I kind of just every couple of years I go in there, and it's just like, I raise holy hell with those roots, and throw them out. It's very labor intensive. But one thing you could do, and I'm not really an advocate for landscape fabric or weed barrier cloth, but if you dug out your raised bed, you lined it with something like a barrier cloth that would allow the moisture to penetrate down below. That way, those little buggers would really have a heck of a hard time. And I actually have, it sounds really bizarre, but I have road underlayment fabric, which is like triple thickness of weed barrier cloth. And it's on a 16-foot roll. Don't ask me how I got it, but I did. It's really cool stuff. And I've used it under raised beds, like in our demonstration garden at the nursery, to keep the soil from filtering out onto the gravel. So let's try that. It would work.
Yeah, that would, because I had put the regular kind of weed barrier cloth at the bottom, and it just,
it's like there's
absorbed it, basically.
There's no fighting that stuff.
Yeah, so anyway, that's my little store. So those of you who are going to be dealing in an urban
trees.
situation with trees and other kinds of invasive kinds of things, which can even be actually lovely blackberries, which end up in the wrong place.
Right.
That's one
And
of our challenges.
it's not like they're invasive. It's just like they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're a plant. They're seeking out the nutrients and this, these good groceries. And they're like, yeah, we really like this. So they're just being good plants.
Right.
So we're talking about your garden setup, and so there's all these different options. You can just go direct seed and plant right in the ground. You can do with raised planter beds like what Carol has, or containers on a patio. Or I'm also put in here a cold frame. Does anybody know what a cold frame is?
Is it like a greenhouse or that?
It's sort of like a greenhouse, yeah. And it's like low to the ground. You can actually make it out of windows if you go on Pinterest. There's tons of examples. But it's a really cool thing to get your stuff, especially your cold season stuff, started a little earlier. And it's really a fun little thing. I like them. I think they're really cool. And I know people that even have greenhouses, but they'll have some cold frames on the south side of either their building of their house or along their greenhouse, and they're a really neat thing. And can't say enough good things about those. I had one, but it's so old. It's like I don't think my cat even goes to the bathroom. Anyway, so in ground. You're looking for something fairly level. If it's not level, you might have to cut the slope and make maybe a terrace or something. You can use wood, you can use pallets. I like to use straw bales and then replace them because the ucky straw can get worked into the garden at the end of a couple years before it finally fails. And then also, you can also use straw bales. Straw bale gardening, has anyone heard of that? Where you literally plant in it.
It's fun.
The one caveat, though, is
it's some herbicides that they use in the farming. Yeah.
Make sure you try to get on-sprayed straw bales, because if you've ever seen what a plant looks like when it's struggling against residual herbicide in the soil, it looks pretty weird. They don't die, but they are puny, malformed. No bueno. So try to look for untreated straw. Good luck. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, if you have children or grandchildren, that's a fun thing to do, is to have the good kind of hay and have them planted in that.
And you can even
really
put those
neat.
on patios. They don't have to be on the dirt. I mean, it's kind of nice on the dirt because then you don't get all the water all over your patio, but you can put them on patios. A friend of mine put them along her driveway one time. It looked really cool. So how to prepare the garden soil to get ready for planting. So first thing I like to do, a lot of people talk about opening up the soil. It used to be, and I'll throw in this to rototill or not too, it used to be like the philosophy was like you had to get in there and turn the soil and go crazy. But what they found out, because we're a lot smarter these days, they found that a lot of those really cool little microorganisms that make soil so wonderful, make good soil good, they get thrown up and basically thrown to the wolves, and the sun kills them. So basically they are advocating now to do like no-till, commercial farming. You want to be as least disruptive as possible in your garden, and just like the first couple inches, just kind of work it a little bit, add in 2 or 3 inches of compost, let it settle. Some people like to do compost in the fall and overwinter it. Some people like to do a what's called a cover crop. Does anybody know what that is? Where you actually intentionally grow something that's very high in certain nutrients, and then you let it overwinter, and before it all goes crazy and goes to flower and reseeds, you chop it and you basically just gently turn it in, and you have it compost directly right there in your soil, so it adds those nutrients directly. There's some really cool things. You could have a whole class on cover crops. It's a really fascinating subject. My partner is a farmer, and he was working a 100-acre field that was super like hard soil. They'd been farming it so heavily year after year, and there were very few nutrients in the soil because of the commercial fertilizers they apply and the equipment that's always pounding the soil. So he actually, at the recommendation of one of the field guys, put in daikon type radishes. They're actually developed to be about 2.5 to 3 feet long. So they're called soil busters.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and so he was basically growing a radish crop. But think about something the size of your arm going into the soil, right? Developing, and then what it does is it rots. When it rots, it creates all that beneficial bacteria and all that organic matter. And then it creates that void so it can oxygenate and get oxygen down. It's like, what a brilliant idea. It's crazy. And so, yeah, that really drove home to me the value of doing things like that. It really is so beneficial. And if, you do it in the fall when your garden's all done, you would do a cover crop.
That's kind of a cool idea.
It is really cool. I wish I'd known about it when I started out gardening on my site, doing that kind of thing, because it really would have helped, But instead, you won't believe what I did, but I double dug, which is an old English gardening term, where you dig and then you dig again. So you go about, 8 to 10 inches, you set it aside, and you go down again, and you work it all together. And I did that on a 30 by 30 plot. That's my garden. And it took me like 2 months. It was insane. But I have horses, we had old manure, so I worked all that in. So the first couple years, it was a little touch and go, but ever since it's been good, and I'll talk about other things that we've added since. So, how to prepare the garden soil. So, like what you guys are doing, you've added your manures and things like that. And did you do that last fall?
We've been doing it for what, 4 or 5 years?
Oh, okay. But you've never grown there?
No.
Oh, so
We just till it up all the time.
okay. So when you till it up, with a rototiller?
A tractor.
Okay. So remember that little thing I was telling you about exposing all those little microbes and everything to the soil?
I mean, we do it during the summer to keep the weeds down, but now
Right.
now this year we're doing a garden, so we're planting it different.
It was just like extra space that we were growing,
Right,
so
right.
we just till it.
So just something, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but when you're like doing that for the weeds, one thing you can do is before they get really going, if you have a tractor or even a lawn tractor, even a little mini pickup, just take a big piece of heavy duty, like 6 by 8 piece of chain link fence, put it on a big board, put some old tires or some cinder blocks on there and drag it, and it will just knock out those little baby weeds. And if you do that like every other week, you're only disturbing the top surface, but then you're leaving everything intact below. It's kind of a helpful thing. Another thing I would do is once you've got that stuff knocked down, you got your garden in, you got it planted, and again, I'm leaping ahead a little bit, you can add arborist chips, not bark chips. Some people use straw. I like arborist chips because straw just blows here. Arborist chips are free from the tree cutter guys. The only thing you don't want to be stuffing in your garden is juniper. You can do pine, you can do any of the softwood, like the Siberian. They're actually Siberian, not Chinese elms. But those, that's okay. But those things are great because they decompose really quickly in your soil, and they really add to the structure and to the nutrients and all the biological goodies that are in the soil that make good soil. That's something that they have definitely been, have you heard about that? Yeah, they're definitely encouraging people not to take that stuff to the dump. You know, use it in mulch in your garden, use it as landscape mulch. You know, we have it at our nursery. I don't sell it to people. People always want to buy it. I don't sell it because I don't know what's in it. If there was something weird in there and your garden all went kablooey, I don't want to be responsible. So it's like, you know, you just got to ask your tree cutting guys, what is it, you know. Anyway, so, does that make sense? It's really good stuff.
Ours is from the tree that they cut in my front yard, isn't it?
We have a whole pile of that. Use it. After you plant, you know, put your plants in and then mulch it. And I've been doing it in my garden for like the last 6 years, and I was telling Carol, it's just amazing what's happening to the soil. It's like worms everywhere, everything's happy, keeps everything moist, I don't have to water as often. You know, it's actually making soil, which is really super.
Yeah, we have a lot.
What's in the juniper?
What?
What's in the juniper?
Juniper is got, it's considered an allelopathic plant. So there's chemicals in it that emit like from the needles and or you know the perimeter, the bark and all that. So if you've ever gone and looked at what grows under a juniper, there's not very much stuff. Things sort of stop at the drip line.
Yes. We had 2 very large junipers in our yard, and we had no grass or anything around them.
Right.
We got rid of them.
Well, what cracks me up is there's a landscape supply company in Central Oregon that sells dyed juniper bark. It's like dyed really dark, like black, and it's really super popular. But if you look at the landscapes that are planted in it, it's like the plants after they get planted, like they put like pretty flowers and they just kind of sit there. They don't really grow. They're just sort of like in this static state. They don't want to die. They don't want to grow. And I think it's from the pressure from the leaching of that juniper. Yeah.
Isn't there something like walnut is that way too?
Yeah, but like how many walnut groves?
Where I grew up, my grandmother had walnut trees and nothing grew under walnut.
Exactly. It's the same thing because they have it's some kind of an acid that's in, is it tannic acid?
Tannic, yeah,
it's
in
tannic
the shell and the walnuts. I grew up in that same
and
area.
You huskle, your fingers turn brown from it when you're cleaning them up and stuff. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, just think about what you're putting in there. Not just because it's organic doesn't mean it's all good. So, but most of the time, for sure. Anybody have any questions? Additives or amendments or anything like that?
I do.
Yep.
We're going to use raised beds
Uh-huh.
because of back issues. And so we have to fill them with soil because, we just got our place. So digging dirt from the pasture to put in there maybe? Or
It's soil. It's soil.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then mix in the mulch like you're talking about.
You
as we
can
fill it.
mix in to kind of, since you're just starting off and there's nothing, you can put some, we have plant-based compost. You can if you make your own compost, definitely put that in there. Start making your compost. That's a whole nother class. Composting is fascinating. And there's some people in our local area that really know what they're doing. But composting is a really good thing to get going. Chicken manure, rabbit manure aren't hot. That's a manure you can use directly. You want to be careful of the quantities. You might want to look into that, figure out what the square footage of your bed is, and figure out how much of that area they being the extension people would recommend, right? Because you don't want to put like 50% rabbit manure in there. That might be kind of funky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then do you need to worry about if you're using the rabbit manure, or you're talking about processed probably, not fresh, or if you are talking about
Well-
fresh, what about the weeds? 'Cause we
Well,
don't
there-
have animals,
Well,
so
see,
we're not
rabbits technically, well, not technically, but I mean, rabbits generally are fed like rabbit food that has, it's basically high in alfalfa. Alfalfa is just way super high in nitrogen. It's got tons of protein in it. That's why they feed it to dairy cows. It's easy to process. It goes right through a rabbit, comes out, and it's basically usable. Llama, rabbit, what was the other one? Come on.
Alpaca.
Alpaca. I mentioned that. Llama, alpaca, rabbit. Chicken. Okay, chicken manure, you gotta hold off. Chicken manure
it's
is
hot.
probably the hottest thing there is. You can buy processed chicken manure. It's like $8 for a 1 cubic foot bag. And it's very rich. It almost smells like coffee grounds, like really dark coffee grounds. It's kind of weird. When it's fresh, it doesn't smell like that. I know, because I used to work at the other nursery before I moved to where I am now, and they used to park like huge truckloads of chicken poop from the valley in the summer right by the window to my office, and I would be like, it was so bad. Talk about ammonia. That's what it was.
Yeah.
The ammonia was like knocked me out. Okay, so let's get back to the stuff here. So compost with manures or without manures. I want to mention about lawn clippings. If people are using lawn clippings in their compost to add to their garden, it's another one of those things, the residual herbicide thing. If people use weed and feed, if they do like spot spray, or there's several things and I can't remember them all, but dicambra is one of them. You might have read in the news about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a huge hue and cry because the dicambra use in certain parts of our country, the farmers farming nearby were having terrible issues with their crops because of the runoff and because of the drift. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. And we are in an area where they do spray a lot of 2,4-D, and 2,4-D tends to volatilize really easily. So legally, there's certain air volume, air speeds, wind direction, that kind of thing. They have to really pay attention to that. Where our nursery is located is right against a big field, and they decided to go in there and spray Roundup one spring morning. Well, the wind was coming out of the northeast, and I checked on NOAA, which is right over at our weather station. Egromet is right at the airport, and it was coming at 12 to 14 miles an hour. And I think 5 is their limit, 5 miles an hour. And I called the company. I could see the truck, and I said, And I was just talking, and the guy like folded up his little spray booms and
Snuck off the
I was
field.
like, thank you. Anyway, because we got a bunch of roses there all leafing out, and roses are really susceptible to Roundup. So if you have somebody that likes to use Roundup, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with it. I won't get into that. It has its uses, but just be careful of drift. That's the worst thing with that kind of stuff. Drift and runoff. Around here, it's mostly drift.
Drifting.
We got more wind than rain.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any to add, or?
No,
Okay.
I've had good.
Alrighty. Any questions? Alrighty. So I was talking a little bit before about plants to help each other. There's like a way of planting when, the three sisters, which is like a Native American
Right.
method of
Corn, beans, and squash.
So they all help each other out, and they all grow well together. They play well together. And it really is kind of a neat thing because you're basically growing on hills or mounds, as I like to call them, volcanoes. But it really allows each of them to develop well, and the squashes and everything get shaded from the corn, and like I was mentioning earlier, when you lay out your garden, think about, you know, how the sun travels and when it's gonna throw shade on its neighbor and make it an optimum thing, not an undesirable thing, yeah. So, adding flowers to attract pollinators. So cut flowers are a really big thing now. The cut flower, you know, slow flower movement. Everyone's like selling flowers. Everybody wants to be a flower farmer. So cool. I love flowers. It's my business. But you got to think about the bees and the pollinators. All the different syrphid flies and all those little guys. They love flowers. So in order to bring them into your garden to increase the pollination, you're wondering, gee, how come I only got like 1 ear of corn per every stalk? Well, it could be the pollinators are not having a good day in your garden. So to make that happen, you want to grow things that are going to be, you know, having flowers successively through your season. Just because there's a lot of bees around here. They bring bees in commercially. That's really good. So it's a good.
And marigolds, I like to put marigold seeds. I just grow the old-fashioned kind of marigolds, the low-growing ones that have all the pretty bronze and red and
The French types.
French type, yeah. And I just save those seeds every year, and then I plant them out in the garden because they're good as repellents for some kinds of insects. And besides, that looks really cool, really pretty.
But they're not. Do they attract pollinators?
Yeah, they do
must.
actually.
They
Yeah,
must.
I know the little tiny butterflies.
Yeah.
Yeah, the buckeye, the little ones. Anyway, yeah.
So it's so funny. Does anyone ever have their marigolds being eaten by any bugs in their garden ever? In those areas? Have you ever had that happen? It's like, because I'm like a central point for all this information, I get like half my customers come in and they're like, my marigolds are getting eaten. There's something around here that eats them. And I haven't, like, I've been here so long, I haven't figured it out yet. But just saying.
Haven't even seen the.
You're lucky.
I plant them. The thing that gets a lot of my flowers, particularly the big poppies that have.
The big.
Yeah, the big blooms, earwigs.
Oh, they go in before they open and chew them, don't they?
They do that, or the seeds where, or the leaves, the way the poppies lay their layers of leaves, I'll pick up a leaf and they'll be just, so earwigs are,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have little tricks for earwigs. Have you ever done those little basins and trapped them?
Yes.
Yeah, those work pretty well. Thanks. Oh, the earwigs, so I just get, what's ideal is using like little saucers, like, you go to the thrift store and buy some cheap little saucers.
And just put them under.
Yeah, or you can use like, like pot pie, the little tiny pot pie tins, the little tins, and just kind of bury them at the grade of your garden. Put them, where you won't step on them or anything, but put them where they get a little sun, and right near the plants that they're bothering, you just kind of put them nearby. And I use like stale beer. Some people use vinegar, water, and sugar. Vinegar and oil and sugar. There's all these weird recipes, but they do climb in there, and it's like they can get in, but they can't get out. So, good idea. And then you just basically tip them out. The other thing that works really well, and I used this when I lived in Northern California, I took newsprint and rolled it up and dampened it and put them like at the base. I used to grow delphiniums and dahlias, and they used to get, like, this is a hollow stalk, they would get inside of there. I don't know how they got in the stalks, but they would, and they'd come out at night, and then they eat all the flowers and they go back in. So they're nocturnal. So during the day you hardly ever see them unless you lift something up and they scatter. So I would just roll these up and then walk around and like tap it into a bucket that had a little oil in the water, and it would drown them. Yeah. Which brings me, you're talking about growing all these plants. You want to be really observant. It's called scouting. So you want to be able to scout your garden. Just walk through it. Don't even think like, oh, I'm going to go prune this. Just walk through and just kind of, take it all in and just look at stuff. And then, then you're like, that wasn't like that yesterday. There was a flower bud there. Just start, you can kind of get on top of it if you scout. And it's, it sounds kind of dumb telling people, oh, go look at your garden. But it really makes a difference if you kind of do that intentionally. Do it. Yeah. How are we doing for time?
Oh, you're okay.
Good. I feel like she's telling this story.
Oh, no. No, I've been watching you in my office so
good.
that if anybody has questions.
But I'm out here.
I know you are, but
You're
I can see you here. It's still working.
just like my mother that had eyes behind her head.
Exactly.
All right. So, talked about flowers to attract and help the pollinators out. Also, you know, gosh, you got bouquets all summer long. You can grow dried flowers. It's really,
Wait, you can grow dried flowers?
yeah. There's flowers that you grow for
you
dried
dry.
flowers.
Oh, I see. I was like,
No, they're
is
types
that
of
like
flowers.
dry wheat?
They're very
farming or
papery.
something?
Yeah. Like when they bloom, they're kind of like, there's ones called straw flowers.
Oh, I do. I know that. Okay. I was just trying to picture.
Go away,
flowers.
librarian.
Okay.
I'm kidding. So, I kind of put this thing about transplanting seedlings in here to just kind of help folks out that weren't at the last talk when we talked about starting seeds and, you know, hardening them off and transplanting. So basically it boils down to, you were here last week. What?
I don't remember.
Soil temperature. You don't want to put them in ice cold soil if it's a tomato. So you want to be just very cognizant of your soil temps. Again, I'm putting in a pitch for the agriment station up on the hill. It's basically the smoke management page. Every 15 minutes they update the soil temperature along with all this other stuff. But you just want to look at the 4-inch and the 8-inch. And the farmers watch that like hawks, because if they're putting in 200 acres of potatoes, they got to know that it's not going to, you know, be 38 degrees. They want it to be 45 degrees.
You can get little thermometers too, soil thermometers.
That's true.
Like in my raised bed, I can put that in if I'm getting ready, you know, if I'm early, going to plant my peas early, just to see if it's optimal.
But if you're like me, I just go right here. I go,
It's not as much fun as sticking something in the
I
soil.
go out in that cold, wet garden and change my shoes when I come in the house. I know. I get it. Totally.
Thank you.
I do. I get it.
I would want the thermometer.
I know. No, it works. But, you know, the soil thermometers are only about this big.
Right.
Can you go down 8 inches? Maybe. No. It's all good.
We're still friends.
We are still. So transplanting. So check the soil temp. Make sure it's going to work for that little plant. If it's a cold season veggie, I checked the soil recently. It's like between 43 and 45 degrees. That's fine for broccoli and all that stuff. The only thing is on the surface, on the top, you might want to just put a little frost blanket. It's going to get down to 25 or 26 Saturday, Sunday.
You mean you could really plant your broccoli?
Yeah, you seriously could. The cold season, if they're hardened off, if they're not in your house, if they've been out on your porch, which they should be right now, because it's like, what, 38 degrees at night or 40? I mean, the other day it was like 42. It was crazy.
Yeah, well.
Last week it was 7.
Yeah.
Last week it was 7.
Oh, I know. But things are evening out a bit. I doubt, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but I doubt we're going to go down into that Arctic thing again. I could be wrong. That's why there's stuff called frost blanket and hardening off your plants.
We're probably babying ours because they're in the house in a greenhouse.
Yeah. I would, remember we talked about bringing them out, exposing them a little at a time,
That'd be a lot of work for us.
I do that with my plants that I start in the tomatoes and peppers
You
and
gotta.
stuff. Yeah, I have a
I
front
have a lot of
porch.
tomatoes coming up right now.
Yeah, so
Little babies.
Uh-huh.
as soon as it's warm enough on the one side of the house, the east side of the house, where it's the warmest in the morning, then I bring them out. And then my neighbors are, you know, they're going, she's really crazy. and I back in
I
again.
do the same thing. I put them on my walkway, and as soon as it gets a little windy, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
We treat them like babies.
yeah.
Every day we have to check on
Well,
them.
now they're all gonna die.
Why?
Because they're gonna come outside and they're gonna freeze to death.
Well,
So
but
then
you
you
want
bring
to
'em in. Then bring
introduce
'em
them.
in.
Yeah, just in and out.
Back in.
They'll figure it out. Maybe don't put them on, make sure there's no heat on them anymore. They need to, it's.
So they start coming up.
Once they're germinated, if they're in a house, they don't need to be on a heat table. Or a heating pad or, a growing mat. They're fine.
Oh god, spoiled rotten then.
I was listening to a podcast about his guy, he's pretty famous. He's a tomato breeder and he grows, I love what he does. He grows his tomatoes, like the same variety in like a tray, a growing tray, all together, all packed together, like maybe 100 tomatoes in a tray. And then what he does is he takes them out once they get their first true leaf. He plucks them out, and when he puts them in the soil, in the next little pot, he puts them really low, so they're just about a 1/4 inch above the soil surface. And he says that's how he grows his nice big fat tomatoes. I thought that was so cool. So guess who's growing their tomatoes like that this year? We're gonna do it. Because it gives you a lot more room on your table, right? If they're all together. Makes a lot of sense. So we're going a little adrift. So putting out the seedlings, gotta protect those little guys. So if you have some method of covering them, be it frost blanket or even like some people do those little tunnels with the little plastic things. Those work pretty well, except in our climate here, we are so sunny that if those little plastic covers, little tunnels, don't have
Yep.
any ventilation, you can cook your plants. Same thing with greenhouses. A lot of people love growing in greenhouses, but for plants that sustain high temperature and they heat really quickly, the small greenhouses like 8x10, 8x12, they get super hot in there. And if you don't have like 2 doors or like a window and a door, some way for the cross ventilation, even a little box fan in there to push it out, it gets really hot. So something to think about. Unless you just want to grow tomatoes in there. But trying to grow like, things that take a little bit cooler. Even, things like spinach you'll put in there and you'll wonder why it bolts. It sends up flower stalks. It's because it's warming up too quickly for it. So you want to kind of keep it in, where it's in the ground, where it's cooler. Okay. What are we on? Direct sowing, perennial plants. We talked about perennial plants a little bit, just making sure that you have them in the right place because basically once they're there, they need to remain there. So for instance, in my garden, I have asparagus and I have it on the far southern end of my garden. And that can be there. They say asparagus can last anywhere from 20 to 25 years in a garden as a perennial crop. And so far it's just doing, every year it's better and better. I get more and more of it, which is really fun. And it's seeding itself because it's an open pollinated type called Mary Washington. So you can take the little seedlings and move them around. If the little seedlings pop up and they start flowering, that means it's a female plant, so it'll spend more time having babies and less time producing stalks like the male plants. So conscientious gardeners, people that want more crops, will go in and remove those female plants. I'm sorry. But that's what you gotta do if you want to produce food. So just think about where you're gonna put those berries, make sure they're far away. And there's something else to say. If you only have a small space yet you want to have berries, you can do that, but you want to put something in called root barrier. What's root barrier? Root barrier is something that's non-permeable. Down at the hardware store, they have this stuff called flashing. if you dig a deep trench, like 1.5 feet deep, and you stuff in a 2-inch thing of flashing, those roots and shoots aren't gonna push through there. Pretty good thing.
What about rhubarb?
Who?
Rhubarb.
I thought you said rebar, and I'm like, we don't grow rebar here.
You're talking about asparagus and
Rhubarb, yes. Rhubarb is a perennial, and it gets really large. I would, if you have a slope and you have an area that's wetter in your garden than the other areas, I would put it towards there. Horseradish is another perennial that can kind of grow and take over.
outside.
Has anyone ever heard of Jerusalem artichokes?
Oh, don't even get me started.
I know.
Sunchoke.
Yeah,
Also known as orange.
they're scary. They scare. They can take over
Yeah.
everything. So if you're gonna do those, make sure you put them in go and get a really big pot from our nursery and sink it in the ground and have those suckers stay there.
We needed to give that talk about 2 years ago, before we planted them in the ground. in
Your
our garden.
sunchokes.
Yes.
They're choking on sunchokes. Yeah. There's, what else would be considered a perennial plant in a garden besides rhubarb, sunchoke, berries, artichoke? Thanks to global warming, we can now grow artichokes. Mine made it through the freezing temperatures we had. I healed it in with bark, just the arborist chip stuff. First it was growing on a mound, so it had nice deep soil, so protection, insulation. And then I, put like this much bark mulch over it. And I kind of peeled it back, and it's got all these little, the leaves are blanched, meaning, they're white because they're not getting sunlight, but there's leaves under there. So I think I'm gonna pull it apart.
That's cool.
It's cool, huh?
Yeah, I
know.
like
I'm
that.
super excited because about 7 years ago, I dedicated a row in my garden and I planted 7 artichokes because I really like artichokes, and I did everything. I did everything. And it just got too damn cold. It got to like -10 or -15, somewhere in there. Decimated. I came back, you can even see where they were. They just melted in the ground. So, one of the benefits of climate change.
Yeah. And heat too. I know you've got that.
We're
is
gonna
one of
talk
the
about heat,
heat
yep.
is something that's
It's a new thing, and we're calling it climate protection. And I think we talked a little bit about that before. And it's more than likely we're going to experience something similar or greater than what we had last summer, which was the heat. It got 114 at our nursery. So, the ground temperature is going to be hotter than that. So for my tomatoes tomatoes are very sensitive to strong heat and sun. The little flowers, they'll actually stop creating buds, and the buds that are on there will actually shatter. They'll just drop off. It's a defense mechanism with the plant. I don't understand how it's a defense mechanism, but I've been told that by several botanists. I'm not going to argue with them, but that's what happens. And I guess it's just to preserve the plant so that it can reflower later on, I would assume. But I covered mine with white row cover, stretchy white knit row cover. You usually see black on our greenhouse, but this one was white. A friend gave it to me a few years ago, and it was awesome. I only lost about half the flowers, not all of them, so I actually got a crop. And then, as soon as it got cooler, everything kind of kicked back into production. But it was a little scary, and I had a lot of customers actually lose plants because they didn't have enough shade, enough protection on them.
yeah.
Yep. It was kind of miserable for a little.
That was pretty scary because I have a daughter who lives in Phoenix, and it was hotter here than it was in Phoenix that day.
That is scary.
We got about 3 minutes.
Okay. So, any questions from the audience? Nope.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have a blog. Can you share that with us?
Carol does.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed. I misspoke. I didn't really have a blog. I'm sorry. Yeah,
You watched a blog.
I want a blog.
You want a blog.
You
I
want?
want, yes.
Well, I'll help you. I'll get you started.
Okay.
Actually, I think, Karen, on your Facebook page, though, it's kind of like a blog at times, isn't it? Because you kind of write little articles.
I try to.
Yeah, so you can also get on hers.
Yeah, see, I don't do Facebook.
It's right there on the Madras Garden Depot. I'll go onto Facebook and you can kind of see it there.
Actually, our very, very lax webpage is actually a WordPress blog.
Oh, there you go.
So
Maybe
there you
that's the other one, too.
Yeah, that's probably what you're thinking.
Yeah.
But when you do WordPress, when you do Facebook, when you do Instagram, it's all just like scrambled eggs in your brain with social media.
Yeah. Try to keep it straight.
It is. It's hard. Watering. Okay, I'm just going to say right off the top, try to use drip. If you can't use drip, use soaker hoses. You know, the soaker hoses they make out of recycled tires. So I'll tell you a little story. They're wonderful. A lot of people don't like them because they evaporate the minerals in those little pores and then nothing comes out. But I'm here to tell you, get what's called a bastard file. I'm not swearing. It's called a bastard file, and you can, if you've got it laying down in your garden where there's plants, you can just scrape it, scritch it a little bit with that file it, and it'll start weeping out right in that area. So turn your water on, do that thing, it'll start weeping right where you want it, instead of everywhere. You know what I'm talking about? Those little soaker tubing things?
Yeah,
A lot of people throw them out because they do
like-
that. Too bad. Now you know.
now I know. Okay. I didn't throw it away though. So.
Good. Well, you can use it. If it's been around in the sun for a while, it gets kind of crispy. You're going to have to get rid of it at some point. If you kind of bury it or if you mulch it with, hello, arborist chips to the rescue, it'll keep that sun off of it.
Where do you have a name of an arborist? Where do you get the arborist
Nope.
chips? You said
So
they're
there's this
free.
thing called Chip Drop. It's a national site that arborists kind of, I don't think they subscribe, they just, the ones with a conscience go on there. But you can just call tree companies, there's arborists are licensed and they're certified with the International Society of Arborists. They're the good guys you want messing with your trees. Then there's tree guys. Tree guys just come out and they do evil things to trees, like topping them. Like you have a beautiful tree in a wonderful shape, it just needs to be thinned a little, maybe remove a couple of crossing branches. No, they go and they chop the bejesus out of it. And then you start getting all these shoots coming up. It's so bad. I know, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to point fingers, but it is so bad. Anyway, so there's the deal. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Carol. Do you have anything? Any last kind of thing?
No, I just was glad to be out. This is the first time since the COVID thing that I've actually gotten out in a public thing.
Yay.
So, yeah.
Yes, this is great. And again, I want to thank the library. And
Oh, no problem.
Anyone have any questions, you can contact us on Facebook or you can contact Gretchen and she can
I'll
forward
push
it.
it. I was just gonna say that, you can check out the Madras Garden Depot on all of her social media. She tries to keep it up. I know, because
I
I
do
follow. So, but we do want to thank you guys for coming out, and thank you all for coming out too. Our next E3 talk will be on genealogy, and we have a library, we have a genealogist, we're going to invite some other people in. We actually have a program, well, not a program, what's it called?
Ancestry.com.
But you can use here at the library for free if you have a library card. So we've got a lot of different things that you can do if you want to know who your ancestors are. We do not take blood tests and try and get your DNA though. Sorry.
That's on you.
That's on you, yes. So,
Just like a soil test.
Right.
That's on you.
also on March 16th, I also have a craft night. We're doing small canvas painting. So if you want to do that, we need people to sign up because I only have so many canvases. We should do that. So, okay. So I think that's all. If you have any other questions, you're free to come up here and talk with Karen or Carol. And then we'll thank everybody for being. We had up to 4 people were watching today.
Wow.
They got it on the right channel. All right, talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.